Train the muscles, not the joints. So welcome back to Natural Gallant Bodybuilding. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about synergy. Now, I get emails from a guy, okay? You know who you are. And I get emails from people all the time and comments and stuff like that. And they're asking about one aspect of training, and they're saying, what about this one aspect? You know, maybe it's heavyweight, maybe it's sleeping enough, maybe it's some sort of new training technique that they learned about. And they're saying, is this the secret to training? Is this the thing that works in order to build muscle? Is this the very thing that I got to do in order to make sure that I get more muscle gains? And the thing is that although each individual technique in its own, each individual program or system, or, you know, whether it's 5x5 or whether it's higher frequency training or whether it's higher intensity training, whatever the technique might be, each technique has some validity for certain people, right? But one thing I find people really underestimate is the value of synergy. Multiple components in something, when they're combined together, they are greater than the sum of their parts. So basically, when you combine food with training, that means more muscle gains, right? But if you just eat food or you just train, you don't get quite as much gains. So when you combine these two components together, sometimes you get a much bigger or a much more significant result. So it's also like this with rep ranges. When you combine rep ranges, I've found that there's more of a synergistic effect than just doing one rep range or another. So some people, they get some results. They do heavy weight for a period of time and then they get some dramatic results. And then they're like, okay, doing heavy and hard, and you know, maybe it's pyramid training or 2 rep maxes or whatever it is that they did in order to get gains. They say, oh, that's the secret to training. That's how you gain muscle. That's how you get the most results in the gym, is you just do that. But then at some point you'll notice, as you do one technique, there's a point to where that technique no longer works. All of a sudden your results are going up, and all of a sudden bang, no results whatsoever, and then you have to change the technique. And then sometimes the opposite principle works to gain muscle at that point. So when people go from heavy weight and all of a sudden they do lightweight for a period of time, and then they do like 40 reps or 30 reps or something, and then they start to gain some muscle mass and feel stronger, and they feel like their strength actually goes up, because when they go back to heavy, then they're stronger. Then they say, oh, lightweight is the secret to gaining muscle. But of course, then they go on that path for a period of time, and they do that for a long period of time, and then like, okay, now my gains are going up, and then all of a sudden, boom, plateau again. Hey Kyle, you're hardcore, you do legs. I saw you do them. I saw you did legs.
My version of them, right?
Even though you worked all day, you did legs.
Yeah, that's true.
But that's why some of us are WNBF pros and some of us aren't, I guess, eh? So you do it. And then like, oh shit, okay, 2 things that I think are the secret to training now are no longer working for me. So what is the new secret of training? And then they go about looking for a new technique. So this continues. And then at some point you realize there's a difference between training heavy and then like with no training experience whatsoever, or training light for a period of time, then training heavy. That's a different type of stimulus because you're combining 2 things. And then there's a difference between combining light and heavy, and you do light for a period of time, then you go back to heavy and you kind of combine things, and then you get a better overall result. And this is called synergy, because what happens is when you start to combine certain techniques, you start to notice that, wow, I'm getting way more results. So you can also do this when it comes down to not just rep ranges, but also when it comes down to stretching movements and pumping movements, hence the stretch and pump principle that I talk about on this channel. So I talk about a lot of separate principles, but when you combine a lot of these principles, you start to realize that, wow, there's this synergistic effect that really leads to overall muscle growth. And it's not just one component of it all, but it's the combination of all of them. So on that note, training and sleeping without eating wouldn't give you any gains. And I'm hungry, so I'm gonna get something to eat. So really the point of this video is that if you're hyper-fixating on just one component of a program, you're not necessarily seeing the entire program. Like I said, I just had some guy talking to me about which part of my training programs is actually producing results. Well, there's a number of factors involved. It's not just the rep ranges that I'm using, but it's the rep ranges along with heavyweight, lightweight, along with being interrupted by staff here. And now I'm just kidding. No, just kidding. So what was I saying? I can't remember. The bottom line is in the programs that I've written, there's different rep ranges, there's different frequency, there's different exercises that are placed in certain orders to really accentuate this synergistic effect. But it's really important for you to understand that it's not just one principle, it's a combination of a bunch that will really give you the best results. And through experimenting, of course, you're going to find out that there's certain principles that really apply to you mostly. You know, say, high reps really work for you great, or maybe you need to have 3 days rest in your training, you need to do a 3-day split instead of 2 days. Like, there will be some truths that you discover, but you'll also discover that some of these truths will be accentuated when you also include other principles as well, and then you'll find your own perfect training program. But yeah, it's never boiling down to one thing, because one thing will work for a period of time and then sometimes it doesn't, because your body's also always changing. So sometimes when people ask me general questions, it's hard for me to answer because your body is different in any one moment. So what worked for you 3 months ago might not work for you now. So why are you trying to memorize what worked? Well, the reason why most people are trying to memorize and figure out what worked is because they think that then they can go back to that template over and over again and reproduce the same result. But the truth is, you won't be able to. You won't be able to. There's so many guys I've talked to that are advanced trainers that they go back to the same thing they did before, say 10 years ago, and it just does not produce the same result anymore. But it was the right principle at that time in their training. So more than anything, it's important for you to remember to be here, to make adjustments based on what feels right, and to find the feeling in the muscle, find the feeling in your overall body, and become a master of sensory perception, and then you make adjustments in your training from there. And that will always produce the perfect training program in any one moment. I like this Perry sauce. It's actually pretty good. This place is called Barcelo's. It's my new hotspot. Get it? Spicy chicken hotspot. So I do understand some of you guys want to know what works, what doesn't work. You want to know what temporarily works. I guess that's the best way to say it, right? Or what the general principles are around bodybuilding. And that's what I teach in the videos. I teach a lot of the general principles around it. But if you want to find out for yourself, what you do is, say you're training a certain program for a period of time and you get to that plateau level. Once you're at that plateau level, then you just change one variable, one parameter, and then see what happens. Measure your strength, measure your body fat percentage, measure how big your muscles get, how pumped they feel, all these types of things, and then you'll find out how that variable actually affects you in your workout. But like I said, even though that one variable might cause a certain effect for a period of time, it doesn't mean that it causes that effect permanently, right? So that's when you have to change things up. So sometimes when you're trying a program out, you have to almost go on faith a little bit, just try the whole thing out for a period of time and just see how the general principles are applying to you. Sometimes through experimentation, you'll find out that maybe a variable of that training program works better for you than the one that is outlined for you specifically. But in the end, I want you to not underestimate synergy, where doing something for a period of time, it's called periodization. A lot of athletes use this periodization principle. Well, why is that? The reason why they try a certain technique for a period of time, whether they're on a strength training phase or a low rep phase or a really heavy weight phase, whatever you want to call it, and then they go into a lighter phase or more hypertrophy or maybe less intensity, more endurance training, is because the body starts to adapt better and they get a better effect from it. So it's always about addressing your weak link at the time, and the body has different weak links that come up at different stages of your training. So as an example, I was doing 315 on the bench forever when I was, first, not when I was first training, but after I'd been training for 6-7 years, I was doing 315 on the bench for a few reps. And I kept on straining my ass off on this one rep range. I think it was only 3 reps or 4 reps. And then every time I come into the gym, my reps would actually go down. I started to overtrain, but at the same time, I wasn't getting bigger. I felt like I wasn't sore. It just felt like I was kind of burned out, but nothing was really happening. But then the minute I went down to a lighter phase day, I just trained 225 on the bench and just repped out, and then went back to 315. My strength started to increase, my pump started to increase, I started to get more musculature from it as well. So not only did I gain strength, but I was actually gaining muscularity. So I was getting two things, not just one or the other. It's not like I had to choose, right? So many people think you have to choose strength or size. They do go together to a point. There is a relationship between the two, although they're not totally dependent on each other, right? So the fact is that by combining up more of a lightweight day with a heavier day, I found I got more results. Now, the other thing I discovered was that when I started training a little bit more frequently, I kept the groove better. I didn't have to train as heavy as often, but at the same time, I was going up in strength. So it was weird. I wasn't lifting super heavy weight, but my strength was going up more efficiently than when I just did a really heavy day once every 4 or 5 days. So you start to actually see these patterns unfold before you as you train, and you start to find general rules that seem to apply to you at the time. But like I said, always be open to the rules changing. Always be open to where are you at now and what might be the right principle for you today, because it does change. It isn't always the same. And again, I talked about this with my bodybuilding diets. Sometimes the high fat and high protein diet worked better for me than the low carb, and then vice versa. So it just depends on what kind of stage my body was in at the time or what it was going through, right? We go through different levels of puberty, I guess, right? So those awkward things that I call puberty. And sometimes there's different things going on with your digestive system, and because of this, it'll cause a different effect in how your blood sugar is affected by food and what happens to your body. So always be open, right? So when you're doing my training programs, or you're doing any program for that matter, it's okay to do the program and see what works, find out which variable affects you which way. But in the end, understand that synergy is at work, and combining multiple principles can have an overall greater effect, right? When you do higher frequency, then light weights, heavy weights, stretch, then pumping movements, you're doing all these different types of stuff. This will have a more cumulative effect on your body, and you will grow overall much better than just sticking to one variable that worked for a period of time. So I hope this helps you out in your training. Thanks a lot for watching. If you need to get a hold of me, just go to naturalgallantbodybuilding.com, and thanks a lot to the Patreon supporters, and take care for now. Share my stuff.
Gallant! Gallant! Gallant!